Welcome back to week 3 of my Construct Devlog series. We have one more week, and so this video will be going up on the 25th. So I've got one more week of development on this game, and that last video will be going up on the 1st, and then I will be spending the next week working on the next game. So you should expect to see the second game in the series a week after that. So there is a bit of delay because I'm actually working from the 1st to the last of the month on one game. So let's just jump in and check out what I've changed since last time. I believe I wanted to work on some UI, which I did, and I wanted to get some new creatures in there, which I did not do. And then I wanted to get some particles in there, which I did do. And so a lot of that I had never done before. Let's take a look at the UI. So this is what I have. And like I said, I've never made a UI before, so this was all new to me. I did it in Photoshop, as you can see here. I just have a bunch of layers that kind of separate things. I tried to keep it organized, but I'm sure you guys know how hard that can be. So mostly what I did to create these is I used the vector graphics stuff in Photoshop to do this. And so they're just really basic shapes with a gradient applied over them, and then I just layered them on top of each other. And I think they look okay. If I was going to be spending longer on this game, I definitely would want to revisit this. But for what this game is doing, I think this works out pretty good, actually. And then I just took some in-game shots of these guys and put them on their icons. So I did have a little bit of thought behind how I was constructing these icons, because one feature that I would like to get, I don't know if it will actually make it to the final game, it depends on how much time I have, is being able to switch out or switch the characters. So the stuff that you see on screen wouldn't always be blue, it might be red. So I tried to keep that in mind when I was building everything and writing the scripts and stuff like that. So like you can see the crystals right there, they will change colors dynamically. A lot of these UI elements will also do that, like the HP bars and the energy bar down here. A lot of these icons, though, are color specific, as you can see down here, just because the glow on the creatures and stuff are specific to the color, so those will always have to be that color. Same with these, the summoner icons, those will also always be that color, so those are just baked in. But I do have the ability to change those in Unity if I want, because I can just pop off this color mask on here and it's just white, so then I could color it in Unity and achieve the same effect. But for right now, they're all just baked in. I actually did some work on the these creature buttons, or construct buttons I should probably call them. I need to be consistent with my naming of these things. So that's why they're all Ravagers, because when the game actually starts, it will populate in the other two. And I tried to make that as simple as possible to flip out on the fly, because if I were to expand this game further, I'd probably have more than 6 things down here, so they would need to be able to come in and go out as necessary, so they can do that. I also added a font, and I did get this one off the web. It was a royalty-free font, and so that's the only thing that I have not made myself, and that's just because it would take a really long time to make that, and I've never made a font before, and I probably would not be very good at it. So I'm going to allow myself a pass on that one and just grab one off of the internet. So the UI took quite a bit of time to figure out and make all these different elements, and I think it definitely makes the game look better, but ultimately it doesn't look like a lot got done, even though a lot of work went into it. And then I mentioned earlier that I haven't gotten any other constructs made. I wanted to, but just ran out of time this week. It was a busy week. But I did spend a lot of time with particles and just kind of spicing up how the game feels, and I think it worked out pretty good. This was kind of my first experience with particles as well. I've done a bit in Unity's previous system, like I used the VFX Graph for this one, and I believe their previous one was called Shuriken, and I used that just briefly. Like, I followed a tutorial at one point to make something look like fire, and I wasn't even super successful at that, so it was still relatively new to me, but I think I finally got a grasp on it, and it's pretty cool. Well, one thing I did was get some animations going for these guys. You can see that idle pose down here. It's just a little better than the one I had before. I also have an attack pose, and that's basically just when a summon happens. So like when you cast a creature, this animation will play. It's very basic, but I kind of needed it to be quick, both to make and quick to fire off, because summoning is a pretty quick process. And then I've got the same for the other guy. So I've got an idle pose for him, and it is different. And then I've also got an attack pose. This one's a little cheesier, a little DBZ-like, but I think it works. So I think that all came together pretty nice. Now let's go ahead and play it, and you'll notice immediately the particle effects because I added quite a few of them. So I'm just going to play it, and we can take it in, and then I will break down kind of what I did. So got new particles for summoning and things like that. I also added some summon animations for each of the creatures. And there are particles that come off of the crystals as well, because the crystals do damage now. I also implemented that. And the animations for the summoners play when we summon things. So I think that's pretty nice. It definitely is a lot more chaotic, but I think that's all right. You see they also have death animations. So I did end up getting quite a bit done. It just wasn't what I thought I was going to be getting done. I kind of figured that I needed to solidify a lot of the other things that the constructs are going to be doing before I add more of them, was kind of why I shifted gears here towards the end of this week. And I think that'll set me up a lot better to just hammer out a few more this next week. So let's take a look at actually what's happening. The first one I want to draw your attention to is the crystals, and this is probably the one I'm least happy with. So I'll let my enemy over here summon one and get it over to me. So once the construct gets within range, these crystals will start attacking. And you can see these crystals do have an attack animation. The light gets brighter and they spin a little bit faster. And then there are some particles that come out and hit the construct. So this is the particle system for the crystal attack. You can see it down here. So it's basically just two systems that are hammered together. This left side here is the particle trail, and I have that set to world space, so they do actually follow the object, and it looks a little more lifelike. And then the right side is just the orb at the front of it. So, like I said, this was probably the most simple one and the one I'm least happy with, but I was already spending too much time doing this stuff, so I figured I needed to move on. I did find out some fun things. One of the things I liked is, first, I was having some trouble setting the color, because you can't just kind of feed in a color to the gradient that they have here. And the gradient is pretty nice because it allows the particles to sort of fade out because the alpha is removed over here on the ends. So it looks nice, and I didn't want to get rid of that for a flat color. And I'll move this down so you can see that this color's not moving into that one. It's going into this multiply color over here and over here. So it took me a bit to figure out that I can just multiply the color on top of this, which, I mean, it makes a lot of sense and should have been more obvious to me than it was. But that was pretty cool. And then I'm also using a parameter over here for the velocity x, so I can, and it just multiplies it. So it always maintains the same velocity, and I can change the direction of the particles by just feeding this a 1 or a -1, which is really, really nice because the particles happen on either side. So that's how I handle those. These were by far the simplest ones that I did. So let's take a look at some of the others. So this was the first one I created. It's basically what happens when you drag your cursor out. Like you grab a monster, drag it out onto the field, and it's kind of showing you where it's going to be summoned. These are the particles that play there. And as you can see, there's quite a lot happening here. So I'm just going to break down the different parts here. So for these lines that move up and down, I have them emitting from a cone, but I've got it very close to a cylinder, so you wouldn't really know the difference. And then I set some lifetime randoms in the scale to make them a little bit longer. However, I did create a, I called it a stretch particle. I just basically created an image file that's a white rectangle, and then I put some outer glow on it so it just looks a little more particle-y, but that gives me the lines up and down. Another thing is the ring around the base, which I'm not sure is super necessary, but it gives it a nice little effect, I suppose. It kind of highlights the actual ring itself, which is kind of important. And that's very, very simple. I have that set to a cone as well. It's basically the same thing. I just use the default particle rather than the stretched particles, and then I have them in a much tighter space down there. Then I have all of these random little particles moving around, and that just gives it a lighter, sort of more whimsical feel, I think. I just have a bunch of particles emitting from a sphere and moving around in random directions. So there's nothing crazy going on there. I think the most interesting one is these rings around the base, and I'm pretty happy with how those look. So basically, I have it as a particle system. There's no shape emitter really, because they just they spawn from the center. And I created that graphic, and it's just literally a ring. So I just went into Photoshop, created a circle, cut another circle out of the middle, and then added the outer glow. So super simple. It was just white. So that way I could add any color I wanted to over it. The spawn rate is really low. I have it set to 2, and then the capacity is 5, so there can't be any more than 5 out there at any point. And I think that combination gives them a really, really nice look. And basically all it's doing is taking that graphic and increasing the size over life, and then it fades out the alpha at the end of it. And I think that combination of all those different rings emitting there and getting bigger gives it a really nice look. I'm pretty happy with how that one came out. So the final one is a little bit harder to see because it's just a burst emitter. It's actually easier to see in the game. But basically I just have those rings coming out, and that's these two things right here. It just sends one ring out and then a second ring out, so they're pretty much identical. And then this last column here just sends a burst of particles, and it has some gravity on there, which I think gives it a pretty decent look. But if I hit play again, you'll notice that's probably the most noticeable one. So like he'll summon something real quick, and that's the little particle bursts that come out when a creature is summoned. So you'll notice that there is a spawn animation now. And there's also a death animation down here. But I knew I needed to add this, and I planned to from the beginning, just because, you know, it looked a little weird to just drop them and they're immediately running. And it looks a little cooler to have them look like they're actually being summoned from something, you know. So that was the thought here. But it has an interesting effect of sort of slowing the gameplay down. I didn't change the energy rate or anything like that, but they don't just fly across the field immediately. They actually have to take a little bit to get spawned and start moving. And then, like I said, I did add a death animation for each of these as well. So when they die, they will actually fall over and lay there for a second and then be taken off the field. As you can see, things are not going well for me in this match. I haven't had much time to balance it. So I'm going to have to test that and factor in the crystals and the spawn times. So I added animations for each of the creatures, so they will spawn and die accordingly, and I've updated all the logic to take care of the retargeting and stuff because now the creatures are out on the field a little bit longer, so I have to kind of deactivate them and remove them from the list of potential targets, so that way they don't just sit there and stare at the dead one for the 2 seconds that it's still alive. So I'm pretty happy with how all of this is coming together. It's a little chaotic, which, I mean, I kind of planned it to be a little chaotic. If I was more experienced and had more time for this, a big focus I should have is on making things a little more clear, because right now it's kind of hard to follow everything that's happening on screen, especially the crystals. I don't think it's very clear what they're doing. So if I ever revisit this project, that's something I'm going to have to address. But this video is already getting to be too long over here, so I should probably wrap it up. I do want to talk about what I'm going to do, or try to do next week, since it is the final week. There are some things I need to get happening, like just an end to the game when someone hits 0, that something happens and the match ends. I also need to add 3 more things for each color, because like I said, the last creatures and stuff like that are going to be color specific, so they won't be shared like these ones are. I hope to make 2 more creatures for each color, and then maybe like a spell that comes out and does something that's not just a creature. And then something I would like to implement is being able to switch the characters, as I've mentioned. So I'll need some UI to handle that and kind of show you what you're potentially getting when you start that team. So it'll probably just show the icons and stuff like that. So I need some more UI. I'll probably need some more particles. And then just generally finishing the game. I probably need to create some sort of logo, and then I also need to figure out where I'm going to be posting this. If you guys have any suggestions, let me know, because I've never shared a game. Well, I take that back. I made a Flash game a long time ago, and I think I shared that on one of those Flash sites. But I've never shared a Unity game, and I don't really know the proper ways to do that. Because I know Unity does have like a web player, but I don't think it's as powerful as the ones that can run natively. But I don't know if people are cool downloading and installing a game like this. So you'll have to let me know. The place that I'm going to start looking is probably itch.io. I know a lot of people put games up there, but I'm not really sure how it works. So we'll figure it out. And then in the next video, I will provide a link for you guys to play this for yourself. And then I will focus more on the creature creation next time. And yeah, so I think the core of the game is there. Just time to add more content, which is kind of a good feeling. It's interesting to see this come together. It's starting to actually feel like a game. I will leave it at that. Thank you guys for watching.